Hi, my name is April, and in this episode of Thrifted Transformations, I will be transforming this white shirt, black boots, and blue gown into a Sailor Moon costume. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is separate the skirt from the top of the dress. Then I decide how short I want to make the skirt, and I mark that measurement from the bottom up so I include the hemline. This way I save myself some time and won't have to rehem the skirt later. After I cut the skirt shorter, I'm going to make 2-inch pleats all facing the same direction. Once the skirt is pleated to fit my waist, I sew across the top to hold the pleats in place. Now I'm going to sew down each pleat about 2.5 inches. Lastly, I sew a zipper into the skirt, and if you don't know how to insert a zipper, I have a tutorial that teaches you how to simply do it. Moving on to the shirt, I first cut the turtleneck off, and then I use a short-sleeved shirt as my pattern. Since I want to include all the details of her costume, I will be cutting out the upside down sweetheart shape she has in the front. If you're a beginner, I recommend skipping this part because it does get difficult to sew. Once you have the shape drawn out, go ahead and cut it out, and for the back, just line it up with the front and cut straight across instead of doing a sweetheart shape. Here's the tricky part where you have to sew the front pieces back together. My advice to you is to pin it right sides together first, and then take your time when sewing the curves and corners together. Once the front and back pieces are sewn, I can now sew down the side seams. Next, I try on the shirt and draw the V-neck and V-shaped waistline. Moving on to the collar, I fold the front of the shirt in half and trace out the neckline onto a piece of paper. I repeat the same thing to the back side and then tape the front and back pieces together at the shoulder seam. Now I get to design the shape of the collar. This part is trial and error, so just keep cutting out collars and trying them on to see what you like best. My tip is to make the front part of the collar very wide and extend it a little past the shoulder seams. Once I am satisfied with the collar, I only need half of it because I'll be transferring it onto another sheet of paper and cutting it out on fold. This is actually the second collar I made because the first one ended up being too narrow at the front. So I made a new pattern with a wider collar and made sure to extend the center front a couple inches. cut 2 collars out, face them right sides together, and sew all around the outside edge only. Next, I turn the collar right sides out and I understitch the seam so the collar looks nice and clean. Now I can sew the neckline closed with a basting stitch and pin the right side of the collar to the wrong side of the shirt. Start pinning from the center back all the way around to the front. After sewing the collar to the shirt, I sew 2 rows of white ribbon along the edge of the collar. To make that puffy part she has at the waist, I used the bottom part of the shirt that I cut away earlier. I first draw out a similar design and mirrored it, and the shape I cut out isn't perfect, but it ended up working out great. Open up the piece of fabric and fold it in half. Then sew down the open side, leaving the 2 ends open for stuffing. The key thing to making this part work is to not overstuff it. If you overstuff it, you won't be able to run it under your sewing machine, and it will make the waist stand up way too much. After stuffing the tube, I can now attach it onto the waist. To make the cool puffy sleeves, I'll be using shoulder pads. Take the shoulder pads and draw some curved lines on them, and then go ahead and sew directly onto the pads. This is going to create that same effect Sailor Moon has on her sleeves. Next, I just pin it right on top of the armhole and top stitch it down, but make sure to hem the armhole first before doing so. To make the awesome Sailor Moon bow, I cut out a strip of fabric that was about 6 by 25 inches and hemmed all the raw edges. Then you want to fold the strip of fabric over each other like so, and bunch up the middle to see how the bow is going to look like. Once you have the look you want, pin the middle of the bow in place and quickly hand sew down the middle of the bow. After running a quick stitch down the middle, simply slide the bow and pull the thread to gather it. Secure it by wrapping the rest of the thread a few times around the center of the bow and then tying a knot. For Sailor Moon's transformation locket, I found this cool heart magnet from Walmart, and I'm repainting it gold. For her tiara, I am cutting it out on foam paper and painting it gold as well. Now I can sew the front bow on and hot glue the heart in the middle. For the back bow, I decided to go with Velcro and just hot glued it onto the back of the shirt and onto the back of the bow. I got these white gloves from the thrift store and will be adding red fabric at the top. For this part, I really suggest you use stretchy red fabric because it will be so much easier for you to slide your arms through. And if you don't have any stretchy fabric like me, just be sure to make the top very wide and add seam allowance. Here I am drawing out the top of the gloves and then cutting out 4 pieces for each glove. I place 2 of the pieces together and sew across the top. Then flip it over to the right side and sew 2 lines going across. Also sew a line to close up the bottom. This is going to create tunnels to put the stuffing in. Repeat the same thing to the other 2 pieces and sew the 2 stuffed pieces together at the sides. Lastly, slide it right sides together with the glove and sew around the opening. The last major part of Sailor Moon's costume is her red boots. To change the color of the boots, I first wiped them down and then I took a white spray paint and lightly sprayed the boots. This will help the red spray paint pop so much more. After letting the boots dry for a few minutes, I finished them off with a bright red spray paint. Now it's time for the final transformation. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Thrifted Transformations, and if you want to see more episodes, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and leave me a comment down below telling me what video do you want to see next. See you guys next time.